The #1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs are 2-0. Now they're ready to open conference play on the road at Kentucky this weekend in Lexington. Kirby Smart stepped to the microphone to talk about what is traditionally a very physical and tough road game in the SEC.
Got to work yesterday and put that game to bed, and started on Kentucky yesterday afternoon, and have immense respect for Mark. He and I have grown to be really good friends. He's one of the best in the business. He's done a tremendous job at Kentucky over the time he's been there. His teams are always very disciplined, very physical. That's a really tough place to play when you go there, as you can see from every time we've played there. It's been really tough. So a lot of excitement playing an SEC opponent on the road. I think we know around this place how hard that can be, and you get an opportunity to play at night on the road, and you know the environment's going to be really loud, and we got to prepare for a tough, really physical game, which is just that way every time we play Kentucky.
Regardless of what we saw against South Carolina.
Yeah, Coach, I'm curious, when you guys went to go to prepare for Brock, or when you're preparing for Brock, how much of that, plan to attack him or defend him will be based on what he's put on tape this year and what he did for years, behind closed doors here? Very little.
I have a lot of respect for Brock, his dad, his family. What Brock did for this university was awesome. He was a wonderful teammate and just a great kid. Always put the team first and would do anything to help the team, and really helped our culture while he was here. So I have a lot of appreciation for what he did, and in fact, he graduated from here. It was really cool when he told me he was going to do that, and then he was going to go play, and he did that.
Coach, I think that's a cool point. I mean, Brock VANDAGRIFF is one of those guys who absolutely, you could tell through his social media, you could tell through the team's social media, you could tell through the way he showed up on game day and the reports out of practice that Brock was always a wonderful Georgia Bulldog. He served the university very well. He graduated, he got his degree, and who can fault the kid for wanting to go take his shot and play somewhere else? I certainly don't. I wish him nothing but the very best.
I know, obviously, it's true. They know any SEC road game is going to be tough. But when you play an opponent like Kentucky who's coming off a game like they did, does that make them even more dangerous than what they might ordinarily be?
I don't know. I think it's all about perception and how you perceive things. They're just as dangerous whether they won or lost that game, in my opinion. I mean, I don't get into the whole. We're going to prepare the same way regardless of what happened in that game. A lot of things went wrong quickly for them in that game, and it snowballed in some ways. And I know what they're capable of. I've seen them on tape. I know the football players they got. I know how physical they are. I know how they're coached. And we got to get ready for a really tough opponent.
That is such a key point. And of course, that's what Kirby's going to say. He knows these guys, and he knows as well as anybody that especially in college football and in the SEC, you never have the same team week after week. And this is the road game. They have to travel, the first real road game of the year. So that's going to be different. So, of course, they're going to prepare the same way, because I've talked about it time and time again. That's what makes this program different, is that everybody's completely bought in to the superstructure and the systems that Kirby's put in place, and that's what allows the Dogs to show up every week and put out their best performance, or at least enter the game with an even keel. You didn't see any sort of drop-off last week against Tennessee Tech, even though everybody knew that they were outclassed. What you saw was Georgia show up and play the way Georgia plays. That speaks to the systems that Kirby's put in place. That speaks to the culture that the University of Georgia has inside the football program. And it's what every other program across the country wants to emulate.
Kirby, to follow up on Brock, just what are his strengths? What are the things you guys are going to see when you guys line up against him on Saturday?
I think we'll see. I think that's part of their identity is figuring out who Brock is, and as well as their other quarterbacks that's playing. So, I think that's something that they got to answer, and our job is to stop whatever they do, and we got to work hard on that. We got to worry about us.
Once again, Kirby, right back to it. It's about us. I'm not trying to figure out exactly how they're going to use him. That's their problem right now. And regardless of what we saw Brock do against South Carolina, the bottom line was that offensive line was not good at all. He got zero help. So regardless of how he wound up playing, like what his stat line looked like or anything like that, you have to take the whole picture into account. And instead of worrying about the fact that maybe Brock is doing this or that and game planning specifically for him, they're going to look at the system that Kentucky runs. How can we best defend that system and attack it? And we are still trying to get better as a Georgia Bulldogs football team. And that is exactly where the focus should be here early in the year.
Coach, obviously the transfer portal is here to stay, I guess. Can you give us just a little bit of idea with Brock and Pop, just kind of what, or not necessarily them, but what it looks like each year as you evaluate and you meet with these guys, and whether they say, I'm thinking about this, coach, or you say, we're thinking about this. Just what does that process look like annually?
I think it's different each kid, every kid's different. Every kid's in a different spot, like what age am I? How much am I playing? Will I get an opportunity somewhere else? What's going on with my family dynamic? I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer to that question. It's, I wouldn't delve into specifically each kid that I deal with. I think that's relative to me and the kid, not for public consumption. But certainly there's conversations I had, and, the transfer portal is an option for some guys to think about going somewhere else. And, it's unfortunate because the feedback we get from the NFL is there's nowhere they'd rather have players than here developing. Countless GMs have told me the kids that come out of your program are so much better off and developed for having stayed, even over playing, because of what kind of practice they get and who they get to go against practice. They feel like their best evaluation is when they come to our practice and see guys go against each other. That's not anything directly at Brock and Pop, not at all. Both those guys were awesome young men, great young men for our program, but just as a whole, asking about transfer portal stuff.
Now, Kirby, and you've heard me say this 100 times, he is intentional in everything that he says. And yeah, you get a fair amount of coach speak from him, but that's fine. That's just par for the course. But he's honest. There are times when he's honest. And this is an example of that, in my opinion. He's telling you that the situation inside the transfer portal and NIL, average fans, casual fans want to say it's always the same. It's all about the money. Nothing else matters. And if a kid leaves, he's a bad apple. Or if a kid left, it was because of the money or whatever it was. And Kirby's just straight telling you, he's pulling back the curtain, giving you an insight into what it is that they have to deal with. Not every situation is the same. Think about your life. Think about the decisions you make. There is no cookie cutter, no blanket assessment. You have a rule, a set of rules and guidelines that you follow, and then you make the best decision possible. And here you have a corporation, an entity in Georgia football that Kirby Smart's responsible for, and a player who is looking out for their best interests, and they have to each make their decision based on what's best for them. Sometimes that means a player stays, sometimes it means a player goes, but either way, Kirby is letting you know a little bit more about the decision-making process there. And the key point there was that ask any NFL person, and they're going to tell you practicing at Georgia is probably better as far as us being to evaluate you than any number of snaps you might get playing at a lower division school or at another school, even if they're in the same division, because the competition is going to vary so wildly, both at that place as well as on the games that you play on game day. If you're at Georgia, they can get a good baseline read for who you are, what you can do, and ultimately that's what's going to decide where you get drafted. The statistics don't matter. I think anybody in this day and age that thinks that the statistics actually matter when it comes to whether or not a person is going to be taken in the NFL draft is misguided. You're looking in the wrong place. It's about, is this person a good football player? Do they do the things that we need them to do? Are they the kind of person that we can invest in to be a quality part of our football team that we can practice and depend on moving forward? That is invaluable. Always be recruiting. Remember, Kirby does everything with an intent. His intent here was to make sure he's letting every recruit out there know, every possible transfer portal addition or subtraction, exactly how the process works. Very, very cool answer there from Kirby Smart.
what is it that Kentucky does so well and makes it a challenge for you guys when you go up there each time?
Physical. So you play defense, you have physical lines of scrimmage, you have huge people on the offensive and defensive line, and you're hard to move the ball on. So the environment they create is very good. They got great fans. They got a great stadium. They've reduced their stadium to have more premium seating, so they actually get less people in, but they're louder when they're there. They're passionate. They play really hard. They're well coached. That's what makes it tough.
He's telling the absolute truth there. This is in no way shade toward the Kentucky Wildcats or their program, but essentially what Kentucky is a poor man's Georgia football program, in that they want to be what Georgia is. They want to be big and physical along the lines of scrimmage. They want to dictate the game. They want to play the game their way, impose their will on their opponent. And in some cases, Kentucky is athletes, like they have athletes that can do that. But when they come up against a team like Georgia, which across the board tends to have a higher level athlete on the field, it's usually not very successful. But make no mistake that they have players on that roster that would play for the University of Georgia. Obviously, there are a couple of dogs that have transferred up there and are now starting for Kentucky, but there are also a couple along that Kentucky defensive line that could come down here and start for Georgia right now. So make no mistake about that. They have talented players.
Coach, give me your thoughts on Deion Walker for Kentucky.
Yeah, extremely physical, versatile player, can play inside out. Seems like he's been there forever. He's a kid we recruited, highly recruited kid, tremendous athlete, just like a wrecking ball. I mean, he literally can wreck a play from any position, and I mean they even dropped him last year, and so he's a tremendous athlete.
Case in point, that is the perfect example of who I was talking about just a second ago. Walker could come to Georgia right now and start. And if he had entered the transfer portal, the Dogs would have been all over him to try to bring him in here. How do we know that? Because, A, he's productive inside the conference. They're familiar with him. But Kirby told you they recruited him. They just didn't win that battle. And if he were available, they would recruit him again, and they would plug and play him in the University of Georgia system. That's why Kentucky is always a physical threat, especially along the lines of scrimmage.
Kirby, I know we're a few days out, but when do you start looking at the weather in terms of affecting the game plan? Thunderstorms, 75% chance or more, and how that affects what you guys want to do and what can you do?
Yeah, we look at it last night and start tracking it each and every day. We do every 2 weeks wet ball drill and practice with wet balls, and like we're going to play in the rain, and we've been able to practice some this year a couple times in the rain. And sometimes the weather up there, typically it's later in the year we play them, and typically it's much colder, which we've had some really tough games up there in the cold, in the wind. This year it looks like there may be some inclement weather, and we've got to prepare for it if so.
So, yeah, he's right. Generally, weather, wind, cold, that sort of thing is a problem at Kentucky, but it's not the kind of problem they might see this weekend. That's an interesting thing, a little insight into how they get ready for wet ball conditions, and they could see some thunderstorms. Hopefully, no delays, though, in the game due to lightning or anything like that. So as long as there's no delays, Georgia's going to focus on controlling what they can control, which is how they play, everything they do down to their technique and their basics. And if they do that, Georgia should still be in good shape against Kentucky, regardless of what the weather's doing. But obviously, if you're playing in a downpour, ball security is of the utmost importance, and that's something that could very well impact the game.
Yeah, Kirby, two questions. One, do you know any more about Oscar's ankle after he got dinged up on Saturday? And two, with LAWSON, just how far has he progressed this year? He's made a big play in the passing game each of the first 2 weeks.
Oscar's good. Oscar's fine. LAWSON is done really well. He would have had the same progression. He got injured last year in camp, and so he missed some time with that significant ankle injury he had. But he's been growing since the time he came back last year, and he wasn't really 100% when he came back to play, but he was able to play, and he was coming off that high ankle, and he got better and better as the year went on. Had good bowl practices, good bowl game. He had great spring practice. He's worked really hard at the things he's got to improve on during fall camp, and he continues to work to get better.
And think back to last year when Brock got hurt, they had to have LAWSON step in and play. So the fact that he had his injury earlier in the year and was able to come back and provide some depth behind Oscar DELP last year when Brock was injured was huge for Georgia down the stretch. And it's just wonderful to hear that he's been able to overcome those injuries, continue his progression, and now he's being rewarded and he's making plays on the field. He is a quality tight end for the University of Georgia and is going to be next year as well.
Kirby, it appears that you had 6 interior defensive linemen play between 9 and 19 snaps. Can you talk about where that position group is at and what you've seen from them?
Working on depth.
Yeah, excited about that group. They've worked really hard. They've gotten a ton of work this fall camp in terms of the youth has. Our older players, which we've got a good group of old and a good group of young in that room. We're really pleased with where they are. The amount of work the young guys have gotten is probably more than we've ever gotten a young group. It's been great because we've been able to take care of our older guys and get them in games and get them going, but then also improve the younger guys. So we've got a lot of depth in that room.
That is such a key point, and it's one that I have driven home over and over and over on the podcast, especially because they have to have depth at that position if they want to be better than they were last year at the end of the year. That's why the second half of that Alabama SEC championship game looked the way it did, is the Dogs just didn't have enough pieces that they could trust along that interior defensive line, and it showed down the stretch. And I've said over and over, that's what this first part here is for. Get these guys in these young guys in the games that they can get into, get them some real reps, expose them to SEC play as often as possible, because they're going to need them down the stretch for depth. But also, some of those cats bring some different skill sets, a little bit more twitch, a little bit more burst from the inside than maybe you see from a couple of those older dudes. So they're at Georgia for a reason. They're quality football players. They just have to grow up. And this season so far has given them an opportunity to grow up. And keep in mind, when Kirby says they're getting a lot of work, that doesn't mean he's not talking about in the game. He's talking about, well, maybe it's a combination of the work they're getting in practice against Georgia's offensive line, which is considered to be one of the very best in all of college football. And every day that they're working against that offensive line, that's where they're improving. It goes back to what Kirby said earlier about that's what scouts care about. Can you grow, perform, improve your game against the very best players in the country every day at practice? Those are the reps that really matter for these young guys. And I think it's wonderful that they have that kind of depth, and that these guys are also not only just depth pieces, but are going to be able to play and help Georgia, especially in the back half of the year along that defensive line.
Kirby, what have you seen from JAMON as part of this Kentucky defense?
Too early to tell. You know, it's one of those things. I just got to look. I looked at their offense first, so I studied the offense all day yesterday. This morning, I got to look at a couple games. So I don't. You know, I think you'd be better asked to offensive coach that question.
And obviously, he's talking about JAMON Dumas-Johnson, who transferred away from Georgia after last season and went up to Kentucky, and is going to be facing the Dogs this Saturday in Lexington. And it will be interesting to see exactly how those matchups go between his buddies on the Georgia offensive line, the offensive unit, and he this Saturday for the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah, 2 questions. One, what happened with NASIR Johnson? It looked like he picked up an injury late on Saturday. And then what have you seen out of CJ Allen and RAYLEN Wilson so far this season and how they've progressed?
Yeah, NASIR had a little bit of a sublux he's had before. Should be fine. RAYLEN and CJ are both very intelligent, mature beyond their years. They're guys that we've talked about repeatedly. They've been thrown in the fire. They've had to get in the fire and do it at a young age, and they're both growing. I mean, most of the time you're playing your first real meaningful time at linebacker at Georgia has been in your second season. Both of them had to play in their first season due to injuries, and that seems to be happening more and more across the country. And these guys have prepared well. They're very intelligent, and they're very well coached.
Nice. Kirby's giving credit to his coaches there, letting you know that those young guys are in good hands. But everything he told you there is exactly what we've seen on the field from CJ Allen and RAYLEN. It's you can see the athletic ability. You can see as soon as they figure it out and know where they're supposed to go, their anticipation is going to increase and they're just going to make more plays on top of plays moving forward. And off the top there, it was good to hear that the young man from Dublin, NASIR Johnson, that he didn't suffer any kind of major injuries on Saturday, that it looks like he's going to be okay. Because again, he's improving every day. He's part of that young group that's going to have an opportunity to build some depth along the line for the Dogs on the defensive side. And so he needs every rep he can get at this point. I'm glad to hear that he's doing okay.
Speaking of RAYLEN and CJ, they both talked about watching the 2022 draft, and that helped them. You've got another year where you're able to play a lot of players on defense. How much was that 22 draft like a proof of concept that you were able to use, that you don't have to come here and play every down and rack up snaps to get noticed?
Yeah, I don't know. We sell that. I mean, we sell the use of our personnel and the playing of our players. We sell it immensely. People try to sell against it. I mean, with saying you don't have, but all you got to do is talk to one NFL person and they'll tell you that they'd much rather have quality over quantity. They'd much rather judge you on the plays you play. And they'd much rather you be training at Georgia than anywhere else. So there's not a lot to argue in regard to that. I think the 22 draft was just an exceptional group of defensive players who were all at one time here. And, we used that. It's a great sell. But regardless of if 22 happened, we would still have the same defensive philosophy. You need depth. You need players. You need a lot of guys who can play winning football. And if you can prove to us you can play winning football, you'll be on the field and you'll get an opportunity to put on tape what you can do. It's not about stats. They could care less about stats.
Oh, talk your talk, Kirby. Let them know, friend. See, that's what I'm saying. He is always recruiting. He knows that these sound bites will be taken and spread around. This is what they're telling these young men who they're recruiting to the University of Georgia. And he said it as plain as day. We sell it, and people try to use it against us. But the fact of the matter is we're so good at developing and the way we run our program and the systems that we have in place that the NFL doesn't need to see game tape, because what they're seeing from our practices is enough to let you know who these players are. And they're so good at what they do that even though other universities are trying to use it as a negative recruiting tactic against them, saying you'll never get on the field, you won't be good enough to play right now, come and make an impact here, Kirby can say, just show up, work your butt off at practice, you will get noticed. And if you're good enough to play, you're going to play. Don't sweat it. I mean, just outstanding in terms of messaging from Kirby Smart and his team on the recruiting trail. And it's not like it's hollow. They can back it up. Like he said, ask any NFL talent evaluator. And that's who these guys really want to know, right? That's who the recruits really want to know what they think. And he just said, ask them, ask any one of them. I bet he's got them in his phone. He'll be like, call him, ask him, see if I'm telling you the truth. He doesn't have to. The draft speaks for itself, but I bet he would. Just phenomenal pitch from Kirby and the guys right there.
Kirby, with an injury like MYKEL's, what are the things you need to see this week to be able to say, hey, he's good to go for the game?
Well, he's got to be able to practice. He's got to be able to go out and compete and run, put pressure on it. And he's doing a great job of rehab. He did a great job this weekend of getting extra time in and see where he's at.
I don't know. I hope he can go, but I'd much rather him sit if there's any question.
When you play one of these bye games or an FCS or an opponent, are there other objectives that you look to meet? You've talked about coaching up bottom of the roster, and in that sense, was it mission accomplished against Tennessee Tech?
I don't know if mission accomplished meaning playing guys. Probably yes. Mission accomplished in terms of how we played, maybe no. We got a chance to grow kids and go out and play, and that's probably an individual basis judgment. How did this guy play? How did that guy play? How did we play as a unit? How did we play as a unit on special teams when other guys got in? And, a lot of these kids early in their careers, this is the opportunity they get to play in front of their family. This is the opportunity they get to play in front of their community or TV, and that's important to them. And they practice hard, too. So I'm very thankful we got to get some guys in the game.
Kind of a nebulous question there. It's difficult to answer. I think he did the best he could right there. It comes down to the player. A lot of these guys, like, say, NASIR Johnson, who suffered, a little scare on the injury front there. That's a kid from here in the state of Georgia. His family can drive up to the games and see him play. He got to play a lot on Saturday before his injury. So for kids like that, it means everything. And all the while, when you have an opportunity to get those guys that you are truly prepping to see if they can help you play later in the year in the game and get them more reps, it's just a win-win for everybody as long as you get out without major injury. Again, a nebulous question, but a good one, and I think Kirby handled it pretty well there.
Kirby, can I get your thoughts through the first couple games on XAVIER, TRUSS, and CHAZ CHAMBLISS?
Yeah, both kids extremely tough, physical. They carry our culture really well. I don't think you'll find two individuals who have had more contact at the University of Georgia than these two guys, especially TRUSS with the amount of time he's been here. And CHAZ, he seeks contact, and they're both kind of what we want our program to represent in terms of toughness and discipline. And nowhere is that more needed than this week. And that's probably why they're in front of you guys, because they carry the water in terms of discipline and toughness.
Well, that's what it means to have senior leadership on your team, to have upperclassmen leadership on your team. And keep in mind how young this team is. More than 50% of this roster, according to Kirby, has been on campus less than 2 years. So you have to have voices that are strong and respected inside that locker room to be able to carry that message forward in terms of the standard and what's required of you at the University of Georgia and how you play. And these two guys, they've taken a lot of heat, both of them, for different reasons. But obviously, they would not be on the field if they were not the best opportunity that Georgia had to win, if they didn't give the Dogs the best chance to perform at their best. Now, CHAZ, again, somebody who gets a lot of grief, especially last year, but all he's done this season is be physical at the point of attack, hold the edge at the end of the line of scrimmage in the run game, which he actually did a pretty good job of last year. And TRUSS, same thing. You might see him, and I've said it as well, I've seen the offense perform better when he's at different positions along the lines of scrimmage. I liked him better last year at guard when he bumped down inside than I did at tackle. But I don't get to set the starting lineup. It's not up to me. It's up to these coaches, and they know what they see every day at practice. And clearly, these are two guys that demand respect, both from their coaches and from the locker room. And it's wonderful to have them have the opportunity to come out and talk with the press and share their experiences about what it means to be an upperclassman at the University of Georgia.
Can you update us on Warren Brinson's injury? And as it relates to Brock and quarterbacks and the transfer portal, is that a different situation given the fact that there's only one that you guys play most of the time? Carson's kind of an outlier in that regard in terms of waiting.
I don't know how to answer that. I don't understand that. Well, first on Warren, he looks good. Hopefully be able to go today. We'll find out more. I don't honestly know until we get out there, but seems to be good. And he did some stuff yesterday in the weight room. I don't understand the question on Brock.
Carson's, not many guys are waiting 3 years these days to get a chance to start. Do you understand what a guy like Brock who's waited?
Brock waited 3 years?
Yeah, I know. To move on because, there's another year behind Carson this year.
Right.
That is a year or two in the system and just wants to play right now?
I think everybody wants to play right now. I mean, I haven't met a player that doesn't want to play. I don't understand what you're asking. If you're trying to say, was Brock's situation different than Carson's?
No. I mean, just in general, with guys looking to transfer, early and often.
Well, not everybody's looking to transfer early and often. They all want to play. They don't all want to transfer. I think that would be a generalization that's not there. You know what I mean? I say at the quarterback position, there comes a point in time when if you haven't played, you're running out of time to play. So I don't know what you want a kid to do. Wait out his whole career and not play? I mean, he did graduate. He became a better player. He certainly feels that he had a great experience at Georgia and 2 national championship rings. So I think that's a positive more than it is any kind of negative.
That was Mark Weiser of the Online Athens Banner Herald, and he was essentially, I think what he was trying to get to there is with kids looking to transfer early and often, how was Brock's experience different? Why did he stay? And essentially, I mean, just from what I could gather, it's just what Coach said. Like, he was a great teammate. He loved Georgia. He did everything he could to help Georgia win. Georgia was successful while he was here. And after he finished his degree, he wanted to go have a chance to play somewhere as a grad transfer. And that's exactly what happened. And I think Kirby makes a really good point there about how everybody's circumstance is different. Not everybody wants to run off and play somewhere immediately if they see that they are improving as a player. And Kirby said as much in this presser today, that Brock improved as a player while he was at Georgia. I mean, think about it. He was under Monken for a couple of years. He was familiar with Bobo. So he got better as a quarterback. Now, what he does at Kentucky is up to him and up to his, what his coaches can do for him up there. But to say in any way, and I don't think Mark was saying this at all, but to say in any way that he wasted his time here or that it wasn't productive would be a bad read, just a flat out misread on Brock Vandagriff's time at the University of Georgia. And it's like Kirby said, he's happy for the kid. He gets a chance to go play. He was as good as his word while he was here, and now he wants to see him be successful. But of course, they're going to get after him this Saturday, and then they'll shake hands after the game, and everything will go back to being awesome.
Coach, what's your evaluation of Anthony Evans as a punt and kick returner? And
I love
and
Anthony Evans.
Progress that translated to the wide receiver position?
Well, Anthony is, number one, tough. He's aggressive. He has a lot of confidence in his return skills, and he has a lot of confidence in his receiver skills. He has worked really hard at two positions in our offense, both the slot and the Z. With some receiver injuries through camp and just not a lot of depth, he worked at two positions. First of all, to play those two positions in our offense, you have to be extremely smart. And he's gone out there and done a great job of repping at Z and F. I'm really proud of what he's done there. He's had a bigger impact on the games as a returner, and he works really hard at that. He takes a lot of pride. I'm hard on him as a returner because I have a high standard of what that position in decision-making should be. He's extremely aggressive, and I want him to keep being smart with the ball.
Well, that should come as no surprise to anybody that Kirby's hard on his returners, because Kirby believes 1,000,000,000% in playing complementary football and setting his offense or defense up in the best position possible to be successful. So special teams are a huge priority at the University of Georgia and the way they use them. And if you start on special teams at the University of Georgia, then you are considered an absolute first-line starter. There is no second tier when it comes to special teams at the University of Georgia. They put their best players on those units because they value them so much. And Anthony Evans is a kid that is, like I said, I love him. I think he's really going to make some plays for Georgia this year. I went out on one of my big bold prediction segments and said I expect him to have at least 2 kick returns or punt returns for touchdown this year. So that was my bold prediction, considering that Georgia hasn't done that a lot over the last few years. I think Anthony has everything it takes to do that. I'm just excited to see him get opportunity after opportunity, because if they come, I think Anthony's going to make plays. And the same at the wide receiver position. Again, that comes back to packages and other things, right? Like blocking and so on. So Kirby's led us to believe that Anthony has all the intangibles. He just has to show up consistently and make it happen. I just think his time's coming, and I'm glad to see him have opportunity on top of opportunity to show what he can do. I think it's going to pay off for Georgia this season, and I am very excited to see it.
Kirby, you mentioned the NFL loves the way you develop players here, but kind of on the flip side of that, just how closely are you able to monitor, what guys are doing at the next level? Like Ladd scored a touchdown yesterday. Do you get a report? Do you pay attention? Or are you so focused on this team here? Just kind of how do you monitor guys at the next level?
Yeah, I don't monitor it. I do get text messages, whether it's from my family, my son, friends. People put it out there, and I see my phone. So it's one of those things. But I don't have a report. I don't monitor it. I don't go say. I just I get a text and it's like, hey, Ladd scored a touchdown, and I see a video of it, and I think it's pretty cool. Awesome. Brock, like, he had a good day. There's a lot of those guys that played played, and 3 defensive guys started in secondaries, I think. I mean, it's a lot of good that you get, but I ain't got time to think about it right now.
I like that.
Yeah, Coach, you mentioned doing the wet ball drills and things like that, preparing for rain. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the keys to being successful on offense, particularly when the rain starts, and maybe some things that immediately change with the game plan if there is some rain.
I'd rather not even get into those.
No, he's not going to do that.
Yeah, how has CHAZ CHAMBLISS improved as a player over his time here?
He's gotten much more intelligent in terms of football knowledge. So he can do recognition. He can tell you tendencies. He knows snap count cadences. He does tackle reports on what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, what the backfield set is to run, pass. He's really tough. He's really physical. He understands our defense. We give our defensive players tools that they can use, but we can't practice them all because there are things that happen on this formation, this play with this defense. It's basically a very low probability that it happens, but if it happens, you can do this. He hits on those. He gets those. He understands it, and he puts himself in an advantageous position when that multiple hits, and makes him valuable is his toughness and the kind of the way he practices.
There you go. That's why CHAZ CHAMBLISS is a starter for the University of Georgia. He just told you everything you need to know about why that young man is one of the first ones to try it out on the field with the G on his helmet every Saturday. They can trust him. He's intelligent. He knows what to do. That's the best case study, example of what Kirby's looking for in a player and why somebody that the fans might not fully understand why he's on the field. Kirby just told you exactly why he's on the field, and that's not going to change.
Coach, just want you to also want assessing players here about the job that Jared Wilson has done 2 games in with snapping and everything.
Yeah, Jared's done a good job. He's practiced more the last 2 weeks than he did in camp, so I think he's shown rapid improvement because of the amount of work he's been able to do in practice, and we need him to continue getting better. We need Jared to be a leader, and the center has to make a lot of decisions on our offensive line.
So there you have it. Kirby Smart breaking down the Kentucky Wildcats ahead of Saturday's conference opener on the road in Lexington, Kentucky. Until next time, enjoy the games and go Dogs.
Told him, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told him.